Welcome to BioBits and Bytes, the show where we take the complexity of cutting-edge technology and break it down into fascinating, digestible insights just for you.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into, well, the electrical whisper of the brain. We're talking about the rapidly accelerating, really transformative field of brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs.
What a field it is. I mean, the promise here is nothing short of revolutionary, right?
Absolutely.
Imagine controlling an advanced robotic arm or, composing an email or even navigating a massive virtual reality environment using only your neural signals.
Completely bypassing the conventional pathways. No muscles, no peripheral nerves.
It's like the ultimate specialized tool for, I guess, the most sensitive project you can imagine, interfacing directly with your own mind.
It really is. And our listener, the learner, shared a pretty extensive stack of sources detailing the entire neurotechnology ecosystem.
A huge stack.
Yeah, from the deep scientific principles all the way to the fast-moving consumer market.
So our mission is clear. We need to unpack the core science, how these devices actually detect brain activity. We'll have to scrutinize the critical hardware trade-offs between, safety and precision.
And explore the clinical reality of restoring lost function.
And perhaps most critically, navigate the complex ethical tightrope surrounding mental privacy and regulation. We want you to walk away from this deep dive thoroughly informed about this revolutionary technology.
So to start, let's maybe nail down the essential definition. What is a BCI?
Right, the basics.
Fundamentally, it's a communication system. Its job is to acquire, analyze, and then translate brain signals into intentional commands for some kind of output device.
And the key part, as you said, is that it deliberately bypasses the central nervous system's normal pathways.
Exactly. The peripheral nerves and muscles we usually rely on for, well, everything.
And here's where it gets really interesting from a historical perspective. This is not some sudden flash-in-the-pan invention of the 2020s.
Not at all.
The foundational science for BCIs goes back decades. The term itself was formalized back in 1973 with Vidal's BCI project. That was an early attempt to use neuronal signals for a direct, real-time dialogue between a person and a computer.
That's right. And even before Vidal, the fundamental groundwork was being laid. In the late 1960s, researchers were already achieving incredible feats in animal models.
60s, wow.
Yeah, they were demonstrating that they could record signals from single cortical neurons in the motor cortex of monkeys and use those signals to control external devices.
A single neuron.
A single neuron. It has taken, 50 years of steady incremental progress to move from that to today's complex integrated systems.
That historical context is so crucial because it shows the immense groundwork required before we reach this this inflection point.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the market and the investment pace, the momentum is just staggering.
It is. I mean, the financial commitment alone signals massive confidence. Sources indicate that over $33 billion has already been funneled into neurotechnology ventures globally.
33 billion.
And that's not just grant money. That's colossal investment driving commercial and clinical pursuits.
Wow. That's massive. And it's clearly translating into real-world availability.
Absolutely. That investment is fueling huge growth, especially on the non-invasive side. For instance, the wearable EEG headset market alone is projected to more than double by 2030.
Just that one segment.
Just that one segment. And this expansion is powered by a sort of synchronized trifecta of technological leaps, vast improvements in wireless tech, the maturity of sophisticated AI algorithms, and of course the design of better, more portable hardware that can actually be used outside a lab.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the basics. How do these devices read our minds, or at least our incredibly subtle neural activity? We hear constantly about EEG. How does a standard EEG headset manage to decode those electrical whispers from the surface of the scalp?
Well, the basic mechanism is elegantly simple in theory, though pretty complex in practice. Your brain cells, your neurons, communicate constantly through electrochemical signal. When millions of these neurons fire together, they create a small but measurable electrical field, these tiny voltage fluctuations. An EEG headset is essentially a very sensitive, sophisticated listener.
A listener with sensors.
Exactly. It's equipped with sensors, or electrodes, placed non-invasively on the scalp. It captures this collective electrical activity and transmits the signal, typically wirelessly, for real-time analysis by a computer.
So those sensors are capturing the synchronized electrical chatter of millions of neurons firing together. Okay, so when we look at the tech specs of these commercial or research headsets, the channel count metric comes up all the time. Why is that number so important? What does it truly tell us?
Channel count is a direct indicator of the device's resolution and its capability. It tells you exactly how many distinct points across the cortex the system is simultaneously monitoring. A higher channel count means you get a more spatially detailed picture of the brain's activity.
Okay, so give us some examples of the spread. What's low and what's high?
Certainly. For intensive research or, say, versatile commercial applications, you might see a 14-channel system, something like the Emotive Epoch X.
Right.
This allows it to capture activity across many different regions of the cortex, giving you a detailed, versatile map. But for specialized, high-density brain mapping research, where you need millimeter-scale spatial information, researchers will deploy a high-density 32-channel device like the FLEX saline system.
So more channels equals a much more detailed map of where the activity is happening.
Exactly. And conversely, for a consumer focusing purely on cognitive wellness or just getting started with meditation monitoring, a low-density streamlined system, maybe with only 5 channels, might be better. It balances basic performance with optimal ease of use and setup time.
And I guess the sensors themselves matter too. I saw mentions of saline pads versus gels.
Oh, absolutely. Some use saline-soaked felt pads while others require conductive gels, and that choice significantly impacts setup time, maintenance, and, user comfort.
Comfort being critical, as we'll get into. But let's talk about the data itself. If the brain's electrical signals are tiny whispers, I imagine trying to capture them through layers of skin, skull, and hair is incredibly messy.
You've hit on the single greatest technical challenge for non-invasive BCIs: noise and signal integrity. The raw biosignal stream is inherently contaminated by what we call artifacts.
Artifacts.
Imagine trying to measure a single volt in a thunderstorm. That's what these artifacts feel like to the raw EEG signal.
Okay, give us some tangible examples of these troublemakers, the artifacts, so we can understand what's ruining the data.
We can classify them into 2 main categories. First, there are physiological artifacts. So signals generated by the body that have nothing to do with the specific cognitive activity you want to measure.
Like what?
Think about jaw clenching, talking, or even swallowing. These generate significant EMG artifacts, that's muscle activity. Blinks and eye movements, known as EOG artifacts, generate massive voltage spikes that can just mask the brain signal entirely. Even the steady pumping of your blood generates subtle cardiac artifacts.
So every time I sneeze or twitch my eye, I'm potentially ruining the data stream.
Precisely. And then the second category is technical and environmental noise. This includes things like baseline drift in the signal, shifts in impedance as those electrodes dry out over a long session.
And just background hum.
Yep. Pervasive environmental interference, like the 60 hertz mains hum from nearby electrical wiring.
That sounds like a minefield. So is it truly achievable to get high-quality data in real-world environments, or are these commercial headsets basically just giving us data contaminated by eye blinks?
It is absolutely achievable, but it requires diligence. Modern wireless headsets are designed for this, and the software is pretty skilled at filtering. However, the key lies in the user experience.
How so?
Ensuring a snug fit and solid sensor contact is crucial. And critically, proper instruction to the user telling them to sit comfortably, avoid excessive movement, and minimize blinks during critical recording phases, that minimizes contamination.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're fidgeting or uncomfortable, the data will suffer.
And what's fascinating here is how studies have evaluated the user experience of these mobile EEG devices. They highlight that lightweight ergonomic design is just non-negotiable for long recording sessions.
Because an uncomfortable user moves more.
Your uncomfortable participant will generate more movement artifacts, which directly destroys the data integrity. So the physical hardware design is actually a critical part of the data quality solution.
So AEG dominates the BCI conversation because it's portable and it's fast, but are there other non-invasive ways to read brain activity that researchers are exploring?
Yes, there are several, although they currently face significant hurdles for daily usage, mainly around portability, cost, and temporal resolution. We rely on EEG because it's the most accessible and has excellent temporal resolution.
Meaning it captures things as they happen, in real time.
It captures changes in brain activity instantaneously.
Okay, so what are the alternatives and what are their drawbacks?
Well, there's MEG, or magnetoencephalography, which measures the subtle magnetic fields generated by neural activity. It's incredibly accurate, but the equipment requires cryogenic cooling and a magnetically shielded room. It's a large, unhandy, and impossibly complex for general use.
Right. Not something you'd have at home.
Definitely not. Then there's fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. This doesn't measure electricity, it measures the BOL-D signal blood oxygen level dependent flow.
Okay, what does that mean in simple terms?
It reflects local metabolic demands. So as neural areas become active, oxygenated blood rushes to them. fMRI sees that rush of blood.
So fMRI gives you an incredibly precise location, the where, by telling you where the brain is using oxygen. Wait, doesn't that outweigh the slowness of the blood flow measurement? Why is the instant timing of EEG still considered superior?
That's a great question. Let's break it down. fMRI does give you spatial precision down to the millimeter, but it comes with major drawbacks. First, the machine is large, expensive, and notoriously noisy, which is uncomfortable. But more importantly, it has poor temporal resolution. It measures blood flow, which is a slow physiological response. It lags several seconds behind the instantaneous electrical firing of the neurons.
I see.
So if you want to decode a rapid thought process or a motor command that happens in milliseconds, the sluggishness of that BOL-D signal just makes it useless.
So the signal is spatially precise, but temporally sluggish. You know where the thought happened, but not exactly when.
Exactly. A promising middle ground that attempts to stay wearable is FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy.
Okay.
Like fMRI, it relies on measuring blood oxygenation, which means it shares that same limitation of poor temporal resolution. However, we are seeing emerging wearable systems like kernel flow and OpenBCI Galea aiming to make portable, localized brain oxygenation measurement accessible outside the lab.
So if electricity, the EEG, is noisy and metabolic activity from fMRI or FNIRS is too slow, what's the next frontier for finding the ultimate high-quality, non-invasive signal?
That leads us to some truly cutting-edge work. Researchers at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, or APL, have been exploring fundamental changes in the brain tissue itself.
In the tissue.
Yeah. Their research demonstrated that neural tissue deformations, literally tiny, minute physical shifts in brain tissue as neurons activate, may provide a novel, high-resolution signal for brain activity.
That is a huge conceptual shift, moving from electrical signals and metabolic signals to physical tissue mechanics.
Yes, it bypasses the entire problem of conductivity through the skull and the slowness of blood flow. This research, leveraging digital holographic imaging, opens up entirely new optical recording avenues. It's part of a DARPA program aiming for the next generation of non-surgical neurotech.
The ultimate hunt for a reliable, non-invasive signal.
Exactly.
That demonstrates the breadth of the research aiming to get high-quality data without cracking the skull open. And that leads us perfectly into the great dividing line in neurotechnology, the choice between staying outside the brain and going inside. Let's talk about the dramatic invasive versus non-invasive trade-offs.
We can categorize the technology broadly into three types: invasive, semi-invasive, and non-invasive, each representing a different balance between signal quality and surgical risk.
Let's start with the gold standard for signal quality: invasive BCIs.
Invasive BCIs, or intracortical BCIs, represent the highest fidelity option. They involve surgically implanting fine electrode arrays directly into the brain tissue, typically deep into the motor cortex. The goal is precise, high-fidelity signal acquisition from individual neurons or large populations of them.
Okay, so what are the concrete pros and cons of taking that dramatic surgical step?
The pros are straightforward. You get unmatched signal quality because you are recording right at the source, offering incredibly high control precision.
Right at the neuron.
Right there. This is the only reliable pathway to complex, dexterous control over multi-jointed devices like advanced robotic arms, because you can interact with a large number of individual neurons. The cons are equally clear. It requires highly specialized major brain surgery.
Which carries unavoidable risks.
Exactly. Infection, hemorrhage, scarring, and long-term implantation concerns.
And the most famous example right now, the one dominating the news, is obviously Neuralink.
Exactly. Neuralink is working on an ultra-high bandwidth implantable chip designed to be completely sealed in the skull. This device uses thousands of microelectrodes, which are threaded into the cortex by a robotic surgeon.
The goal being to record from exponentially more neurons than prior devices.
Right, achieving unprecedented bandwidth.
Then you have the interesting middle ground: semi-invasive BCIs. If going fully into the cortex is too much, is there an approach that balances risk and signal quality?
There is. The traditional semi-invasive route is electrocorticography, or ECOG, where electrodes are placed on the cortical surface underneath the skull.
So not puncturing the brain tissue itself.
Correct. This provides a much stronger, better quality signal than surface EEG because that skull barrier is removed, and it offers spatial resolution in the millimeter scale. But the truly revolutionary semi-invasive approach is the endovascular method.
The endovascular method. That sounds less like neurosurgery and more like cardiovascular medicine.
And that's the brilliance of the approach pioneered by companies like Synchron. They implant a device, the stentrode, internally. It's guided via a catheter inserted into the jugular vein.
Through the blood vessels.
Yes, navigating through the blood vessels until it reaches the motor cortex from the inside. Conceptually, it's similar to placing a cardiac stent.
Wow.
This method is potentially a much safer, minimally invasive alternative to a traditional craniotomy because it avoids opening the skull entirely.
That's a huge potential game changer for reducing surgical risk and increasing accessibility.
It is. And finally, of course, we have the non-invasive BCIs, the EEG headsets we've been talking about. They are safe, accessible, and convenient. No surgery required.
But the obvious drawback, as we discussed, is the signal degradation that occurs when the electrical chatter has to pass through the skull and scalp.
Precisely. Signals weaken significantly, by orders of magnitude, resulting in lower signal quality and limited control precision compared to invasive devices. As researchers often note, while non-invasive devices are being developed to avoid craniotomy, the fundamental physics of signal weakening through the skull remains a profound technical challenge.
Let's talk about the clinical reality these invasive trailblazers have already created. We are moving from theory to people controlling their environment with thought alone.
The success stories are incredibly compelling. One of the most prominent examples is Nolan Arbaugh, the first participant in Neuralink's PRIME study. Living with quadriplegia, he received his implant in May 2024.
And the results?
Since then, he has gained significant functional independence, controlling digital devices like a cursor and playing games just using his thoughts.
That's amazing, the restoration of interactive control.
And we've seen equally profound success in communication. Imagine being trapped in silence for decades. A stroke survivor who had lost all ability to speak 18 years prior was recently able to communicate again in real time using an experimental brain-computer implant. The device decoded her imagined speech into fluent sentences.
Imagine speech, not just moving a cursor, but the intent to speak.
Exactly. This is a very powerful demonstration of restoring function long after the initial injury, offering hope for patients with aphasia.
And are we seeing similar progress in international trials outside of the U.S.?
Absolutely. Clinical trials are rapidly accelerating in places like China. Companies like NeuroXS developed a fully implanted wireless coin-shaped BCI system using a highly minimized surgical procedure. One patient was able to control a computer cursor in just 5 days after starting training.
5 days? That's an incredibly rapid adoption rate.
It is, and within 17 days, that same patient had extended control to smart home systems and humanoid robots, demonstrating the versatility of the interface.
That speed really highlights the effectiveness and the bandwidth you get from that direct connection into the cortex.
And we shouldn't forget the pioneers who paved this way. You know, think back to 1998 with Johnny Ray, who suffered from locked-in syndrome. He received one of the very first human brain implants designed to produce high-quality signals for movement.
And he learned to control a cursor.
He established that this type of control was viable, learning to navigate a computer cursor using his thoughts.
Have you ever wondered why these highly precise, invasive devices face signal variability over time? It seems like once they're in, they should just work indefinitely, but that's often not the case, is it?
No, it isn't.
Why do the signals decay?
That's a great question. Let's break it down. Longevity and signal consistency are the biggest engineering hurdles in invasive BCI design. The variability in signal quality is largely related to the body's defensive reaction to the foreign material.
At the electrode-tissue interface.
Right. The body treats the electrode like an invader.
And what specifically happens at that interface?
2 major factors degrade performance over time. First, you have glial scarring. Glial cells, which are the supporting cells in the brain, react to the implant by forming a dense layer of scar tissue around the electrode tips.
Okay.
And second, you have blood-brain barrier leakage due to the trauma of implantation. This biological reaction essentially walls off the electrode, significantly reducing the quality of the electrical signal pickup.
So the body is trying to heal itself, but in doing so, it creates a literal biological barrier that undermines the device's function. It starves the electrode of the signals it needs.
Precisely. And this biological challenge is the primary driver behind cutting-edge research in material science. Researchers are now developing ultra-flexible, tissue-like design.
To trick the body, basically.
They are attempting to minimize this foreign body reaction by matching the mechanical stiffness, which engineers call the Young's modulus, of the electrode closer to that of actual brain tissue. The hypothesis is simple. If the implant is mechanically seamless, the body will stop reacting to it as a rigid foreign object.
That is brilliant. The engineering solution is to make the technology biologically seamless, almost invisible.
Yes.
Let's move from the technical specs to the immense human impact. What does this convergence of mind and machine mean for patients and for consumers?
Well, the humanitarian driver is the core goal: to restore useful function to people suffering from severe neuromuscular disorders. We are talking about conditions like ALS, severe stroke, spinal cord injury, Parkinson's, and especially locked-in syndrome.
Right. Neurorehabilitation is a massive area for BCI application. How does it work specifically for stroke recovery?
So BCIs are being used in advanced rehabilitation training combined with motor imagery, where the patient simply imagines moving a specific limb and then gets real-time contingent feedback.
So they think about moving their hand.
And the BCI detects the specific neural pattern associated with that imagined movement and instantly provides feedback, maybe by moving a virtual avatar or controlling a robotic device.
That feedback loop is critical, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're essentially teaching the brain how to bypass or reorganize itself around the injury by rewarding the correct neural pattern.
That's the key. This approach has demonstrated measurable improvement in upper limb function and has been clinically shown to induce neuroplasticity even in chronic stroke patients.
Meaning the brain is physically rewiring itself months or even years after the injury occurred.
Exactly.
What about spinal cord injuries? How does a BCI address a physical break in the communication line?
For SCI patients, DCIs are an invaluable tool for entirely bypassing the damaged neural pathways. They allow patients to control complex assistive devices like robotic exoskeletons or wheelchairs.
I saw that example in the Chinese clinical trial.
We did. A powerful example where a man who had lost all 4 limbs regained the ability to play chess and racing games using his mind after receiving an invasive implant. It just illustrates the profound potential for restoring interactive control.
And for conditions like ALS or locked-in syndrome, where the patient is fully conscious but cannot move or speak, BCIs are, quite literally, a lifeline.
They provide essential augmentative and alternative communication tools, or AAC tools. BCIs enable patients with LIS to type, use speech-generating devices, or interact with computers using only sustained thoughts or intentions. It's profoundly life-changing.
It restores personhood, the ability to communicate.
It does.
So BCIs are the ultimate high-tech AAC. But I understand the sources point out that ultimate doesn't always mean fastest, does it?
That's a crucial distinction.
Is there a point of friction when comparing BCI communication to older tech?
There is. While BCIs are incredibly sophisticated, they aren't always the fastest or most efficient communication method yet. Studies have found that BCIs can sometimes exhibit slower and less accurate responses with a higher cognitive workload compared to simpler devices like established eye-tracking devices.
Let's pause and simplify that part again. So even though thought-to-text sounds like science fiction, sometimes the tried-and-true eye-tracking technology is still faster and less mentally taxing for the user?
That's exactly right. The sheer cognitive and emotional involvement needed to learn and consistently generate the required brain patterns for BCI control can be a limiting factor. The human element of consistent control, what's called BCI literacy, is a huge factor.
But the integration of modern AI is closing this speed gap fast, I assume.
It is. We saw Synchron in July 2024 integrate generative AI, specifically technology powered by OpenAI's GPT, into their BCI system.
And how did that help with communication speed?
It allows nonverbal individuals to generate text or audio prompts far more efficiently. The AI uses context and potentially decoded intent to predict the next word or phrase.
Ah, like predictive text on steroids.
Exactly. Reaching near conversational speeds by generating text based on a short initial thought rather than the user having to type out every single letter. That combination of brain signal reading and predictive language models is the next critical frontier.
Beyond motor restoration and communication, BCIs are finding roles in other clinical areas. I saw mention of remote diagnostics.
This is crucial for long-term brain health assessment, especially for patients living in rural or underserved areas.
Right.
The ability to collect high-quality EEG data remotely and securely allows medical professionals to assess neurological conditions like subtle changes in seizure activity without requiring the patient to travel to a specialized clinic.
And what about mental health? I saw mention of mental health and mood applications as well.
This is a rapidly growing area focused on neuromodulation and neurofeedback. BCIs are used for real-time seizure detection for epilepsy patients, acting as an early warning system or even triggering microneurostimulation to prevent a seizure.
And neurofeedback therapy.
Neurofeedback therapy allows patients to visualize their own brain activity in real time, teaching them to self-regulate specific brain patterns associated with conditions like anxiety or ADHD.
So you're essentially using the BCI as a mirror for the mind.
Precisely. And in a more experimental phase, we are seeing trials, like one by Forest Neurotech, using highly localized, non-invasive ultrasound implants to map and influence neuron clusters, specifically in regions linked to mood regulation. The goal is to potentially boost mood or treat treatment-resistant depression and OCD.
The idea that we can use BCIs to regulate our own mental state leads us directly to the non-medical consumer frontiers. What does BCI look like when it leaves the hospital and enters the living room?
Well, the non-medical domain, which includes things like gaming, entertainment, and monitoring without a medical purpose, is actually seeing a higher pace of development and investment than the medical domain right now.
Largely due to fewer regulatory hurdles, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Less paperwork means faster innovation. A major field is cognitive wellness. Non-invasive headsets are used by individuals to monitor and train their focus, track stress levels, and quantify the neurological effects of contemplative practices like meditation.
So it's a data-driven approach to mental well-being.
It's connecting ancient traditions with modern scientific methods and real-time biometric feedback. It's quantifying introspection.
Then there is the fascinating, maybe slightly unnerving, world of neuromarketing.
This is a powerful application. Standard surveys and focus groups are notoriously unreliable because people often say they feel one way, but their brain reacts another way subconsciously.
Right.
Neuromarketing researchers use EEG to measure genuine, unfiltered emotional and cognitive responses to marketing materials, ads, packaging, product displays. It provides crucial insight into what truly captures attention and influences purchasing decisions beyond conscious self-reporting.
So brands can design experiences based on our subconscious brainwave patterns.
Yeah.
That certainly feels like a powerful and deeply relevant application that drives massive consumer adoption.
It speaks to the widespread potential. The expansion of BCIs into immersive environments like gaming, AR/VR interfaces, and thought-controlled smart devices represents rapid growth. Collaborations among neurotech firms and tech giants like Apple and Amazon are creating scalable business models focused on enabling thought-controlled interaction in our daily lives.
A new form of computing entirely.
Yes.
All these devices, whether controlling a prosthetic or analyzing marketing appeal, rely on interpreting that messy electrical whisper. Let's shift gears and discuss the intelligence layer. The AI and machine learning that turns raw brain data into usable commands. This is where the magic really happens, right?
It is the engine room of the BCI system. We need to clearly visualize the BCI processing chain. It has 4 sequential components. First, signal acquisition, which is the headset getting the data. Second, feature extraction, pulling out meaningful patterns. Third, feature translation, converting those patterns into a command, like move cursor right. And finally, device output.
And AI is central to everything past acquisition, isn't it? It's the interpreter translating a foreign, messy language.
Absolutely. The raw signal is so noisy and variable that AI and machine learning, or ML, algorithms are non-negotiable. Their purpose is critical: to interpret the noisy neural signals accurately, significantly reduce the extensive calibration time required, and improve the overall reliability of the BCI output.
So what are the primary workhorse algorithms doing the heavy lifting in decoding EEG?
For feature extraction and classification in EEG-based BCIs, the 2 most common and effective algorithms are linear discriminant analysis, LDA, and support vector machine, SVM.
Okay.
LDA is efficient and often suitable for data where the different classes, say imagining left movement versus right movement, are somewhat clearly separated.
But since brain data is messy, it's rarely that simple, right?
Exactly. Brain data is complex and rarely linearly separable, and that's where the support vector machine, or SVM, becomes critical. SVM offers crucial flexibility through the use of different kernels.
Kernels? What are those?
Think of kernels as mathematical lenses that transform the complex, nonlinear data into a higher dimensional space where separation becomes possible.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
So the kernel is the key that unlocks the door to handling the brain's nonlinear mess, allowing the SVM to create those complex boundaries.
Yes. For instance, the radial basis function, or RBF kernel, is highly popular because it creates smooth, nonlinear decision boundaries, which is often necessary when dealing with the nuanced and messy complexities of brainwaves that don't fit into neat, straight lines.
And as the datasets get larger and we move towards identifying spatial patterns across many channels, we start moving into deep learning.
Correct. Deep learning offers even more advanced decoding capabilities. Convolutional neural networks, CNNs, are particularly effective in BCI applications because they excel at capturing spatial patterns.
So a CNN is good for multi-channel EEG, where you're looking at the whole map of the brain at once.
Exactly. It's like an aerial map of brain activity. And for patterns that unfold strictly over time, where the sequential dynamics are critical, like decoding rapid changes in emotional states. Recurrent neural networks, RNNs, are the architecture of choice, as they are specifically designed to handle sequential data.
This brings us to a major hurdle you mentioned earlier: variability. Since everyone's brain is slightly different, and even my brain is different on Monday morning than it is on Friday evening, how does AI overcome the challenge of customizing the BCI for every single user, every single session?
This is the calibration hurdle, and it's the single biggest barrier to mass BCI adoption. Motor imagery-based BCIs, which rely on the user generating specific mental patterns, often require long, extensive calibration sessions, sometimes hours or days of training before they become effective.
Which seriously diminishes their usability. I can see why. If I have to spend 2 hours teaching the machine how to understand me before I can use it, that's a huge commitment.
That's the problem. And we also face massive cross-subject variability. Brain signals differ wildly between individuals due to anatomy, cognitive strategy, and concentration levels. This complicates the development of standardized BCI systems that just work out of the box.
So how does the field attempt to streamline that setup process and make the BCI feel less like complex training homework?
The critical AI solution here is transfer learning, or TL. TL aims to alleviate these cross-subject and cross-session problems, instead of forcing a new user, the target domain, to start calibration from a blank slate.
It uses what is learned from others.
Right. The system transfers knowledge, the patterns, features, and optimal decoding algorithms it learned from existing large datasets collected from other users, the source domain.
That's fascinating. It's like the AI is making an educated guess based on accumulated human knowledge rather than forcing the new user to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. It drastically streamlines the setup process. Instead of 2 hours of training, maybe it's 20 minutes, because the model already has a refined starting point for decoding basic human intent.
This raises an important question. How do we ensure these complex systems are accurate, especially outside the lab where there's a lot more noise and unpredictability?
We need rigorous evaluation. That's where techniques like cross-validation come in. You can't just trust a model that performs well in its training data. It might have simply memorized the answers.
And you need it to work on new data it's never seen before.
Exactly. We use specific performance metrics to ensure the model generalizes well to unseen data, preventing the BCI from simply memorizing training patterns that aren't actually indicative of the user's robust ongoing intent. If it doesn't generalize, the system will fail the first time the user is slightly tired or slightly distracted.
And beyond the AI, we touched on the challenge that some users struggle to produce consistent neural patterns for control. What was that called, and how does the field overcome it?
That phenomenon is known as BCI illiteracy. It refers to users, even healthy ones, who struggle to produce the stable, consistent brain patterns needed for controlled tasks. Overcoming this requires both sophisticated software filters to handle the noise and the user's inherent variability and consistent patient training protocols.
This complexity, the convergence of high-fidelity signal acquisition and powerful AI decoding, brings us face-to-face with the biggest challenge: ethics and governance. This technology is interfacing directly with the mental process, which feels fundamentally different from other data streams.
It is qualitatively unique. We have to recognize the profound sensitivity of neural data.
So why should we care more about our EEG patterns being collected than, say, our sleep cycle data?
Because neural data is arguably the most sensitive and personal of all human information. It can reveal a patient's cognitive processes, underlying emotional states, real-time focus levels, and, crucially, the internal states associated with medical conditions.
It's the private internal monologue.
Unauthorized access to this raises very serious concerns because it violates the private psychological sphere of human existence. This is the issue of cognitive privacy.
And this is where the media often jumps to mind reading. Can current BCI technology actually decode inner thoughts, the words I'm thinking right now?
The expert consensus is very clear on this, and it's important we convey this accurately. Current BCI technology cannot decode inner verbatim thoughts. This strong brain-machine reading, or strong BMR, is still science fiction and hype.
So the Black Mirror scenario is not yet real.
Not yet. However, identifying basic intent, recognizing brain disorders, or decoding motor commands is possible. This is referred to as weak BMR. And even weak BMR raises profound ethical issues regarding mental privacy, especially when the technology moves into the commercial sphere.
The threat of surveillance, regardless of current accuracy, is deeply worrying, particularly in non-medical settings where the data is being collected for profit or control.
Absolutely. The alleged case of the Hangzhou factory workers in China wearing brain-scanning hats to decode emotions and measure productivity levels is a chilling example.
Right.
Regardless of the actual accuracy of those specific systems, the precedent it sets monitoring cognitive and emotional states in the workplace is profoundly concerning for worker autonomy and privacy.
And this leads to a murky area, coercion and volition. If a company starts using neurotechnology for mandatory workplace monitoring or cybersecurity, how voluntary is an employee's consent?
The line between volitional consent and coercion becomes extremely gray. Employees feel immense pressure to comply, perhaps even using personal neurofeedback tools, out of necessity to fit in or demonstrate loyalty. That pressure renders the consent questionable and poses a direct ethical challenge to cognitive liberty.
This sensitivity and the rapid commercialization have driven a global consensus for protection. We're talking about the rise of neurorights.
Neurorights are proposed legal and ethical frameworks specifically designed to protect neural data and cognitive liberty, the right to think freely, without interference or monitoring. This movement has gained global momentum, supported by experts and tech leaders who recognize that existing human rights and privacy laws are just insufficient for this new domain.
Why are current laws insufficient? For example, medical use is covered by IFIO in the US, and general data privacy in Europe is covered by GDPR. Where's the gap?
That's the core of the regulatory crisis. IPA covers a surgically implanted BCI used in a clinical trial because that is medical data. But consumer neurotechnology, the headbands you buy online from a non-medical firm, falls into a massive regulatory gap.
And what happens to that consumer data?
Many consumer devices have predatory user agreements that allow the companies to store and potentially sell or monetize brain data indefinitely via the cloud. This data is so sensitive it could reveal predilections, vulnerabilities, or even subclinical neurological issues, yet it is being stored without the robust protections afforded to traditional medical records.
That is a critical failure point. What legal actions are starting to address this specific neurodata protection gap?
We are seeing pioneering legislation at the state level. Colorado recently became the first U.S. state to explicitly provide consumer privacy protections for neural data by expanding the safeguards for sensitive data under the Colorado Privacy Act. It's a crucial specific step.
And what about the international frameworks, like the UN's view on human rights?
Internationally, the UN Secretary General has called for clarifying the application of existing human rights frameworks to neurotechnology. Current international human rights laws, like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights or the Convention Against Torture, or CT, were written decades ago. They're ill-equipped for this.
Give us a tangible example of how BCI challenges the definition of torture or coercion. This is a powerful dark side to this technology.
It's a protection gap we need to address urgently. Under the CI, torture typically requires physical pain, injury, or severe mental suffering inflicted with intent. If state officials were to use a highly accurate, non-invasive BCI system, perhaps one capable of weak BMR, to rapidly and coercively extract information or a confession, and it caused no physical pain or overt nerve damage, it might not satisfy the current legal threshold for torture.
So the lack of visible injury or traditional methods of coercion means the act of coercively reading brain intent could escape the definition of torture.
Exactly. This is the horrifying incentive that could arise. New interpretations and frameworks informed by neurorights principles are urgently needed to prevent this type of cognitive coercion from becoming a loophole in international law.
And finally, we have to consider security vulnerabilities. If this technology is integrated with our brains, it is also integrated with the network, making it vulnerable to attack.
That's a critical security risk. BCIs integrate complex technology with the biological brain, creating a massive attack surface. If you are using your thought process to, say, authenticate a password, a critical use case, that thought process becomes a point of vulnerability to brain hacking.
And since we rely so heavily on AI to interpret the signal, the AI layer itself must be secure.
Absolutely. The reliance on complex algorithms means we must guard against security risks, like poisoning attacks. An attacker could intentionally introduce bad or misleading data into the BCI's training model, compromising the neural signal integrity and undermining the system's accuracy.
Which could lead to incorrect commands being executed.
Or, in a medical setting, misdiagnoses. Robust cybersecurity must be integrated from the very beginning of the device design.
The challenges, technical, biological, and ethical, are immense, but the trajectory of progress suggests we are only at the beginning of this revolution. Let's look at the future outlook.
The future of BCIs is personalized and deeply integrated. We expect to see this technology rapidly evolve from experimental, niche applications into standardized, mainstream clinical tools for major neurological disorders like ALS, stroke, and dementia.
And improvements in hardware will make them safer.
Improvements in flexible electrode design and wireless capabilities will make invasive systems safer and more accessible to patient populations globally.
I found the concepts around new integration particularly compelling, especially combining BCI with other cutting-edge tech.
Absolutely. The immediate future involves seamless integration with artificial intelligence and virtual reality. We are already seeing combined systems like ChatGPT, BCI, and VR, offering a completely new perspective for diagnostic and personalized therapeutic treatment for issues like mild cognitive impairment.
How do those three technologies work together for someone with mild cognitive impairment?
Well, the VR system provides the immersive, controlled environment for cognitive training. The BCI monitors the patient's real-time neural activity, their focus, engagement, cognitive load. And the AI, maybe via large language models like GPT, tailors the environment and customizes the exercises.
It creates a powerful, personalized, and adaptive feedback loop specifically for cognitive health.
Exactly. So instead of a one-size-fits-all crossword puzzle, it's a completely responsive, neurologically guided cognitive workout.
That is the goal.
Over the next decade, regulatory approvals and commercial launches will drive widespread adoption, but this has to be strictly paralleled by ethical guardrails. Ethical considerations regarding data privacy, security, and equitable access will ultimately shape the responsible deployment of BCIs.
Ensuring they remain transformative tools for improving quality of life, not instruments of surveillance.
Precisely.
This technology truly bridges the gap between mind and machine, restoring and potentially augmenting human capability. For the learner, let's summarize the three core takeaways from this deep dive using our bullet-style recall technique.
We have focused on the three critical conflicts driving BCI development today.
Takeaway 1. The invasiveness trade-off. The high-fidelity, high-precision control required for restoring complex movement like in Neuralink's invasive chips or Synchron's semi-invasive stentrode requires accepting surgical risk and navigating long-term biological challenges, specifically the signal decay caused by glial scarring.
Right. Meanwhile, the high accessibility and safety of non-invasive EEG requires accepting the significant challenge of cleaning incredibly noisy signals and managing common artifacts like EOG and EMG.
Takeaway 2. AI is the interpreter. Machine learning algorithms, particularly sophisticated techniques like support vector machines, which use flexible kernels to find nonlinear patterns, and transfer learning, are not optional. They are absolutely necessary to translate the messy, variable brain signals into useful, accurate commands.
And transfer learning is the AI solution essential for overcoming that massive hurdle of individual variability, drastically streamlining the lengthy calibration sessions required to make BCIs effective for new users.
And finally, takeaway 3. The new human right. The rapid commercialization of non-medical neurotechnology demands proactive legal protection. The global community is pushing for neuro rights, specifically protecting mental privacy and cognitive liberty because current data protection laws like HIPAA or GDPR are often insufficient for this qualitatively sensitive data.
Which creates severe risks of data misuse, indefinite storage, and surveillance outside of clinical settings.
Okay, that's a lot to process.
We've discussed the importance of defining neuro rights to protect against abuse and misuse, such as that dangerous legal gap related to coercive confession extraction. But let's end by considering the immense opportunity. BCIs promise to augment performance far beyond merely restoring lost function. We could see enhancements in everything from surgical precision to specialized fields like psychiatry and sleep therapy. If we successfully secure and standardize these technologies, the greatest challenge might become defining the acceptable boundaries of the human mind itself when we have the tools to continuously monitor and eventually modulate our own thoughts.
That's a profound thought to end on, defining humanity in the age of seamless neurological augmentation. Thank you for joining again.